What's going on, everybody? Vulkan here, and today we are taking a look at Tainted Grail, a new dark fantasy RPG from Awakened Realms featuring strategic turn-based combat and an open world. Now, this game is based around a deep and immersive universe crafted by the Tainted Grail board game that went on to win Best Project by Kickstarter in 2018 and has been pretty popular since then. So before we get into our impressions of the game, I first wanted to thank Awakened Realms for the key to test this game out. And as with all other sponsored content, the developer sponsors coverage of the game, but in no way influences my opinions on the game. So everything you see and hear from me is my own point of view and by my own volition. So if you have any feedback or questions about this process, please let me know. And with that out of the way, let's talk about Tainted Grail. Let's finally get into this early access title. So to kick us off, this game is actually split into two modes, Conquest Mode and Story Mode. So getting things started with Conquest, this is where you're going to find the most bang for your buck right now, because it gives you a roguelike experience where you can get a little further each time. And the thing I noticed right out of the gate in Conquest Mode is that this puts a new twist on the Slay the Spire experience. But instead of choosing rooms on a map, you actually navigate your character to each new event, and you move along those kind of narrow hallways and corridors until you reach the treasure, or you reach a fork in the road. Do you want to take a right to go to the abandoned windmill, or do you want to head down this really long dark path to see what lies at the end? Those are the type of decisions you have to make, and they're incredibly fun to make because you don't really know what's going to happen at the end. I ended up going to this windmill and they were talking about how valuable it would be and how great it would be, and I ended up going inside and it was packed full of creatures and I died. So it's one of those things where, you know, you go and you find these different areas and they might not appear what they seem to be. You know, a windmill from the outside looks valuable, but you go on the inside and it's chock full of things that are going to kill you. In my next run, I managed to go find an abandoned prison, which led to a couple enemy encounters, but at the end of the day, I actually ended up getting quite a bit of treasure, and then it let me go talk to an NPC, which I brought back to my town, that then could repair my gear. So there was a whole bunch of different interesting things that were all kind of piled in to that exact playthrough, but it just goes to show there's a lot of exploration and a lot of unknowns in the game. And I think that's one of the key words that I would use for Tainted Grail is unknown. There's a lot of different unknowns. But when you first start out in Conquest, you're going to be given a choice of 3 classes: Berserker, Guardian, and Brawler, all part of the warrior archetype. And each has their own combat style. Now there's another archetype you could choose, but it's unavailable. However, I think after playing through the story and kind of learning more about Tainted Grail, I do think this archetype is going to be a druid, and just kind of going off what they look like, you know, robes and things like that, I really think this is going to be a druid class, which would be really, really cool. So you have Brawlers. These specialize in single target damage. You have Berserkers, who specialize in dealing more damage the lower their health is. Then you have Guardians, who specialize in combos and protections. So for me personally, I tried out all of them, and the one that really jumped off the page to me that I really enjoyed was the Berserker. I really liked the Berserker's playstyle. It felt much better to handle the game's combat at the time because it's pretty unbalanced, and I'll get to that later in the video. But each class also gets a specific rune that it can activate during combat. So for my Berserker, the more damage I take, the more damage my rune will deal when I activate it. So this can lead to some pretty badass combos you can set up because you can activate your rune at any point in time. You don't have to have any sort of energy to activate it or any sort of like prerequisites. It's just whatever that rune takes to charge up, you can click on it to activate it and deal out some pretty significant damage or protect yourself from attacks. So Conquest Mode is really all about how deep you can make it with your limited supplies. It's a roguelike, right? So it's not meant to be easy. It's not meant to be a walk in the park. And you begin that mode with a few potions, a few candles to help push back the weird, which we'll get to in a little bit, and a map to return to your village. And as you move through the world, you're going to find different treasures that contain supplies and sometimes a new piece of gear, which will always help you. But all roads lead to the same place. You always end up at a legendary creature that you need to kill in order to progress. And these are tough. These legendary creatures are very, very tough to beat, and really it's all in their damage, their effects, and some of the things they can do just to overwhelm you. But if you can manage to kill it, then you'll actually head off to find the next one, and it'll open up more of the map, and you can continue your current run. So far, you know, Conquest has been a really fun time. It definitely feels way more difficult than it is intended to be due to some pretty harsh RNG and the fact that enemies can deal heavy damage that can't always be mitigated. And I'm not very good at roguelikes, right? I am not the best at these games, but even I could tell that this mode needs a little bit more balancing to really see its potential. But a lot of people in Steam reviews really seem to like it, and with all that being said, I did still enjoy the overall feel of the combat, the world, the itemization, the enemies, you know, that whole kind of mode. It all felt epic. It really fit the theme that they were trying to go for, which is that grim dark fantasy. So if you're looking for a roguelike experience, Conquest might just be the thing that will keep you satiated for a little while. Flipping things over into the story mode. Now, story is a very narrative-driven mode, and it features a lot of listening and a lot of reading, but it also has full voice acting and is done incredibly well. You could just kick back, listen to it, and the voices fit the theme and the tone so well. There are some games where they cast the wrong voice actors and it really doesn't capture that magic they're going for, but in Tainted Grail they did a very good job of finding the right voice actress and voice actors to actually bring the whole thing together. So the story right now is currently a 3-hour long teaser of the single player campaign. And the story focuses on restoring your small village's menhir, which is a statue that keeps away the darkness called the Weird. Now, the thing about the weirdness is that prolonged exposure leads to some pretty nasty mutations, which you get to see, and death. So without giving away any spoilers for the story mode, I was actually surprised to see that this is a dark spin on a classic fantasy story that all of us have heard at least some point in time in our life. So it's really cool. I think a lot of people who like those classic fantasy stories, they're really going to like the spin of this particular one. Now, because this is a dark fantasy or a grim dark game, you know this is going to be a brutal and unforgiving world. That's just how these things go. If you've ever read the Grim Tales, this is precisely kind of the same type of thing. There are no happy endings. So you will see some twisted things that you'll be put up against. There are some very difficult decisions that you have to make. For instance, I had to choose between euthanizing a group of sick people, taking that same group of sick people, forcing them out of the house to die in the streets, or I had to hand them over to a group of psychotic cultists. So really there's no upside, right? They're most likely going to die in any certain scenario, but do you want to be more humanitarian about it and euthanize them and maybe they'll just go to sleep? Do you want to be the person that throws them out of the house to die in the streets? Or do you want to be incredibly malicious and hand them over to a group of psychotic cultists where they are either used in experiments or perhaps sacrificed to something and die a very brutal and horrible death? Really, it's all up to you. And the thing with Tainted Grail is, it's a game where your decisions influence storylines. So you need to be comfortable with whatever decision you choose and be able to deal with the consequences of that decision. So overall, I really enjoyed the story mode in Tainted Grail. It felt immersive, it felt engaging, and I really want to see where the story goes from here. The final battle of the teaser was incredible. You could feel the power and the importance of some of the cards that you were playing and the impact it was having on your teammate at the time. And I think this is where Tainted Grail really shines. And if I were them, this is where I would place a lot of my energy. The Conquest mode is great as an alternative mode, but at the same time, I feel like story is where this game is going to craft its legacy. It's not going to be, hey, remember Tainted Grail, the game where Conquest mode was cool. It's going to be, hey, remember Tainted Grail, that fantastic story-driven game that really gave its players a lot of mixed emotions. So we've talked about Conquest, we've talked about story, let's talk about the actual gameplay. What are you going to be doing in this game? And gameplay in Tainted Grail is really kind of the epitome of easy to learn, impossible to master in its current state. The gameplay presents itself as simple and to the point. You move your character around a map of narrow lanes, you encounter enemies, treasure, points of interest, other NPCs who may or may not help you, and you can move using WSAD or point to click. I did find point to click to be much easier because these maps are not wide open worlds, right? It's not this massive field you're going to be moving around in. There are pathways. It's easier to let the game do the work for you by clicking where you want to move instead of getting caught on some corners and things like that. So while you're out in the world moving around, you're also going to be able to open up an inventory. And your inventory has a few things, but it's very important you keep your inventory organized, especially before you engage in combat. You have 4 quick slots that you can use at any point in time, and then you have 4 combat item slots, which are only available in combat. And if you forget to slot any of those combat items, you will not be able to use them at the start of a battle. These are things like potions, armor reductions, improving your DPS. There's all kind of buffs, debuffs, and health restoration type of things you can slot in here. And if you don't have those slotted, you won't be able to use them, and you're going to be putting yourself at a pretty big disadvantage. You also have a weapon and armor slot that you can customize as well. So as you're going through exploring, as you're finding NPCs, you're crafting things, these will be things that you can actually improve along the way. Now, combat in Tainted Grail is where the whole easy to learn, impossible to master saying comes into play. When you begin combat, you will always strike first, right? You might think, okay, that's a little overpowered, but at the same time, it's balanced around that. You play these cards to perform actions, so if you want to attack, you can use the basic attack card. If you want to use something that hits multiple enemies, you can play a card called Multi-Strike. There are other cards like blocks, stances, buffs, debuffs. There are some that will triple the damage as long as your enemy is stunned. All of these things work well together. But the important thing to understand about combat is it's not all about offense. Right? This is a tactical game. So you need to make sure you play defense as well. You can't just run through things, attack, 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 and expect to come out without a scratch. Each turn, you're going to have 3 energy to use on playing cards. Now, this number can be adjusted through other cards, combos. It can also be reduced through debuffs, but you'll always have 3 energy to start. Cards obviously cost different levels of energy. You're going to have incredibly powerful ones that cost 3 energy and basically wipe your turn out. You're going to have some that cost 0 energy and are free to play, but they might come with a negative side effect to the card. So that's something that you have to look out for as well. Enemies you're going to be facing range from very easy to incredibly challenging, and this is where the strategy comes into play. Blocking attacks, setting up retaliations, and using combat items are all things you need to think carefully on, especially when facing legendary monsters, which can wipe you out in a single hit. Now, with all of this kind of being said, combat is also where I felt the most frustration in the game. It was incredibly satisfying to play when the game dished out a challenge and you could use the cards at your disposal to counter it, right? It felt good to overcome that challenge. I played these things correctly. I played the cards I needed to play and I came out on top. Unfortunately, what I saw happen time and time again when playing Conquest specifically is that I was just not able to overcome some enemy groups. Packs of 4 to 5 enemies, each dealing multiple attacks that would chew through any blocks that I had in place, and then carve off a huge chunk of health, which would lead to my death either the next turn or the next battle. And there are other instances where you just have poor RNG, right? You land on a turn where you don't have a block, the enemy is going to kill you in one hit, and you just have to brace for impact. Those I can understand, right? Those shouldn't happen all the time, but things line up. The planets will align every now and then, and you will die. But it's the ones where I make all of the right moves and still die that muddy the overall experience. And this all comes into balancing. It all comes into, I have one block card, you place that on your character, I can block one attack, but then I'm facing 4 things, each one dealing 4 individual attacks. So my one block will block the first hit, but then I get hit with the other 19 attacks that are coming in at me, and I end up dying. Those are the things that get a little frustrating and really can ruin the experience overall. But taking a step back, right, I don't want this to come off as, oh, Tainted Grail, skip it, it's terrible. Tainted Grail has great combat. I like the system they have in place. I feel like it's a good twist of the roguelike, slay the spire type of play style. It's just a balancing thing. And balancing, fortunately, is pretty easy to fix comparatively to the rest of really everything in game design. So they just need to take a minute and balance the things out before it leaves early access. And like I said, that's not difficult to do. They have a good foundation to build on, and I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy it. So my final thoughts, right? All in all, guys, I feel like Tainted Grail is a great experience. It's something I know lots of people will enjoy because it kind of hits the nail on the head for a few different play styles. If you like roguelike games, then there's Conquest. If you want a deep, immersive story, then you have story mode to play. If you want a tactical RPG experience, then combat should kind of fill that need for you. If you like card-playing games, then you might enjoy this one a little bit just because the theme and the way you play actions. But I do want to hear from you guys. Have any of you guys played it? What do you guys think so far? Am I on the mark about Conquest? Am I completely insane? Do you guys like the story? Do you like the narrative-driven kind of aspect of it? One thing I would really like to see is a deck overview screen. So something that kind of shows, hey, here's your full deck. Go through, look at the cards you want, swap out the cards you don't want, because that's not in the game right now. Right now it's just you level up, you gain a card, it adds it to your deck, and then you might see that card on the next time you play through. I would really like to get a holistic view and really kind of set up different play styles, combos, and themes instead of having the game do it for me. So that is one thing I would like to see improved. But like I said, I would love to hear from you guys. I gotta know what you guys think. And as always, thank you so much for the support. It just blows me away every single video. It really does. Anyway, this has been Vulkan, and I'll talk to you guys next time.